Sure, thank you, Margareta. And I guess I'd like to acknowledge that, we're having this fireside chat. I don't know where the fire is, here on the Lheidli-T'enneh unceded territory. So a bit about me. I've been in the industry 30 years. I'm an engineer by training, and spent the last 15 years actually working on resource development parts of the value chain here in Northeast BC and now on the Coastal GasLink project from upstream activities all the way through downstream. And I've had the good fortune of being able to work alongside a lot of the buyers of LNG that will be sold from the LNG Canada facility for that time.
It's really exciting stuff. And of course, this is a two-parter project. So Jason, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Margareta, and thanks everyone for having us. So I have been in this industry for about 20 years doing LNG projects. I started out in the U.S. building LNG export projects import projects, when America was the largest importer of LNG in the world. And we were going all over the world to buy LNG to bring to the United States. And then I've moved around to Europe, the Middle East, and Australia, and back again, doing LNG export projects. So really excited to be here because this one, I think we'll hear about a little bit later, is pretty special in the world of LNG, and we're really proud of what we're doing. I was really pleased to hear Brian's great introduction, and everything I say is going to agree with him because he represents one of my biggest shareholders, so that worked out really well.
That was the panel, basically, but we'll be unpacking a lot of the ideas that we heard. Just a couple of opening thoughts from me, and we'll just get into that. My introduction to liquefied natural gas actually came, I think, about a decade ago. I was in my first job in politics, and I spent basically the whole summer writing about the opportunity on the North Coast in BC and what it would mean. And there's been a bit of a transformation in the types of projects that were scheduled, but we're finally on the verge of unlocking that opportunity. And of course, there's been successful support from one after the other provincial governments, and now we're going to hopefully very soon establish Canada as a major exporter to overseas markets. So without further ado, just a reminder that there is a question and answer section in the Kuvas, so be sure to get your questions in early. I think we want to do a little bit of an update on where things are going with construction. We're now in 2022. It's the final stretch for both of these projects, and despite a very challenging last couple of years, an unprecedented global pandemic, 2022 was a pretty big year for both Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada. I'm really curious, are there specific moments or achievements that you're both really proud of? Let's start with Bevin.
Sure. The last, 2022 was a big year, and this event in and of itself is a testament to the resilience of the sector being able to come together, and really honored to be here with Jason and the LNG Canada team. This last year, it felt like I've spent more time with LNG Canada's team members than some of my own team members, which has been great. Through the balance of COVID, you saw through the video us developing a pipeline through effectively 2 mountain ranges and some of the most complex territory across anywhere in the world, and through communities across that 670 kilometers of right-of-way. And the things that I remember most about the last year in particular all surround people. So whether they be the team members, my own team members, the team members of our customers at LNG Canada, the communities, the Indigenous communities that we've been working with, all of those moments and coming out of the back end of the pandemic, and to have accomplished completing 80% of the project in that environment, through those challenges and what was likely the most busy construction season Canada has witnessed on record in terms of the pipeline industry, with nearly 18,000 workers, and the vast majority of those in the province of British Columbia in terms of the resource space. The single most important memory that I have or accomplishment was being at our option signing ceremony in March in Vancouver with the 16 First Nations that have signed an equity option agreement. And it's world-class project, but now a first-in-kind project that has brought our nations that are working alongside us to be equity owners, to have the option to be equity owners in this project that will be around for the next decades to come. So that was the single best moment.
It's no exaggeration to say it was a pretty big deal when it got signed, and I'm pretty excited to see what comes next. Jason, how about you? What's really been sticking out to you as a highlight the last couple of years?
Well, so I only took over as CEO of LNG Canada last April, so the whole year was a big highlight for me. When I look back at our site in Kitimat, at the beginning of last year, it was the culmination of years of site preparation and piling and moving rivers and moving fish and honoring all of our commitments. And at the beginning of 2022, we started to see one or two of these big modules arrive by ship. And it was such a big deal in Kitimat when these ships rolled in. And I think the big accomplishment is that now when a ship rolls in with a 50-meter tall module that weighs 9,000 tons, it's just another Wednesday. And it happens so routinely that we've really become used to it. So our plant has risen from the ground in the last year. We finished our materials offloading facility. We've almost finished our berth. We made really good progress on our tank, all the modules. We took occupancy of our administration buildings where our staff will run this plant for the next 40 years. And overall, we're at 75% complete overall, so really good progress last year. That was a big one. This year is going to be another big year. And right now, there in Kitimat, we have more than 5,000, closer to 6,000 Canadians working at our site in Kitimat, and that's just us. That doesn't include the thousands supporting Bevin and Coastal GasLink, and we're really proud of that. And similarly, what we've done with First Nations in and around Kitimat and Terrace has been phenomenal, and I've learned so much from them. But we're really excited. And one area that Coastal GasLink and LNG Canada work together on is not just our two projects, but we're both supporting the Cedar project, which will share the Coastal GasLink pipeline capacity and support the Heisler-led Cedar project, which will just be around the corner from us there in the Douglas Channel. And just seeing those relationships blossom, seeing the jobs and the economic opportunity has been really exciting.
You can really see how the meaningful Indigenous engagement piece is really woven throughout both these projects. And yeah, it's really remarkable given especially the large profile, the national economic impact. I really, I've been to Kitimat a couple of times, and there's already a lot of big industrial infrastructure there. And even if you have that firsthand experience, you know what it looks like. You understand the sheer footprint and the large dollar figure that comes in building something like this. Translating that to understanding the relative impact to Canada is sometimes a little bit hard, and I'm really curious, maybe starting with Jason this time, how do you explain this to someone who maybe is outside the sector? How do you articulate the scope and the scale of that impact?
Yeah, so it's been said many times, LNG Canada is the largest private investment in the history of Canada, and we're really proud of what the team has delivered. And if we think of just, hard dollar, what does that mean for economic impact? Already to date, we have awarded, as LNG Canada, more than $3.9 billion in contracts and procurement to local BC businesses. And of that, more than $3 billion is to Indigenous-owned or local businesses in the Kitimat Terrace region. So that's real economic impact. Obviously, thousands of jobs during construction. We're in the middle of hiring a lot of our operating staff that will run this facility for decades to come. That's 250 to 350 really, really good jobs there. And the construction workers are learning the skills of building mega projects and building really high, complex projects. And, at this conference, we've heard a lot about this. The world is watching. The world wants to know, can Canada and can BC specifically deliver mega projects? And I'm proud to say we are still on track to deliver LNG Canada by the middle of the decade, as we promised when we FID'd this project back in 2018. So we will prove people that that Canada can deliver mega projects. And I hope on the back of that, then that allows the next wave of projects, most of which are Indigenous-led, to follow behind us and prove that Canada can do even more than one of these big mega projects, but can continue to deliver on that promise.
I'm really, really thrilled as well by the opportunities that are in large centers as well. Obviously, so much of that is localized, but whether it's, like you said, Canada's brand or trade opportunities, really growing our contribution to the trade balance as a sector, really, really big opportunity there. On the linear infrastructure side, how do you explain it to people, Bevin, if they ask you, what exactly are you doing? How big is it?
Well, that conversation often starts with the construction activities. And, as Jason pointed out, in combination with the $3+ billion that LNG Canada's contracted with local communities and Indigenous communities, you add our activities and you get to a $5+ billion number. So that's a very significant contribution to the economy, particularly in northern BC. But what we're really excited about and what we're focused on in terms of our learning and working with our Indigenous communities as well is we plan to be in partnership for 40+ years here. And that 40+ years can provide enduring roles, opportunities, and build real businesses. So while we talk a lot about this as a global infrastructure project, which it is, it's the small community businesses that we're seeing being grown that will eventually just strengthen the communities across the province. And so, a great example is we had, a young woman, her name was Ashley, and she was kind of a construction monitor for us and a community liaison monitor with the Nakasli Wooten group, and she went to school, learned the skills that we had on the job, and now she has her own environmental consulting business. And then she'll probably start hiring people, and it just will grow. And so that's really exciting, and I know there's probably hundreds of businesses like that that are supporting LNG Canada at the same time. And so I think when we look back, even though we're contributing to a world-class project, we're really building community, and I've seen that, in my career, having worked in the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, I've seen large, thriving communities being built on the back of the energy industry, and I've worked globally, and I've seen the same happen there, so that's what's exciting for us.
I think that's really the key here. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet or a great number in a press release. It's real human impact. And you shared a little bit, Bevin, about what you've been hearing. Jason, are there stories from your many travels on the ground, local relationships with the Haisla or more broadly, that have really stuck with you?
So if I think about opportunities for economic growth and for economic reconciliation, one that we're really proud of is our contract award with High Sea, who are going to provide our tugs. And High Sea is a joint venture between the Haisla Nation and Vancouver-based Seaspan. They're going to provide the tugs that support all of our LNG tankers coming in and out of the Douglas Channel for many decades to come. And not only is it going to be a joint venture between the two that provides jobs for the Haisla and other nations along the waterway out the Douglas Channel, but together we have decided to push the bar on what is possible in terms of GHG intensity and environmental responsibility, because we are in an environmentally pristine area and we want to respect it. So the harbor tugs that High Sea is building for us that will maneuver all of our LNG tankers in Kitimat are fully battery electric tugs that will be powered by BC Hydro renewable power. And the LNG, the tugs that will take the LNG tankers all the way to the Pacific Ocean and back and escort them will be LNG powered. These are the cleanest tugs in the world. And they are, thank you. And it's something that it's great for the environment where we're operating. It's great for the Haisla, it's great for a BC business, and it's great for us. And it really is a win-win-win.
That's a really good example of both those quantifiable benefits, particularly when it comes to a business case, and also some of these tangible intangibles. There are things that matter, and Canada has set very, very rigorous regulatory conditions in many cases. Relationships with communities have developed these things, and they do translate to an advantage on the global market. And I can see we have a question here coming in from Slido. I'm going to incorporate it into what I wanted to ask a little bit. We've had some really interesting visits in recent months. German Prime Minister, Japanese PM came to visit, and both of them really made the case that there is demand for Canadian LNG abroad. And we know why that is, improving energy security in times of some geopolitical uncertainty, enabling energy-hungry markets to switch fuels and reduce emissions, and those possibilities are truly pretty endless. Bevin, starting with you, is there anything you wish that people knew more about the demand side of the equation?
Well, I could talk for hours on this subject. As I mentioned, over the last 15 years, I've witnessed personally, and I've been in discussions around how our Canadian industry, whether it be the upstream that can support the LNG development, and the LNG facilities themselves are not only world-class basin, world-class developments, they're cost competitive, and they're also done at the highest sustainable standards globally and environmentally. And we're really proud to be partnering with LNG Canada on this project because, their facility has the lowest emission intensity, and Haisla, who will be around the corner with Cedar, will even beat them in terms of the impact. And what I often hear is, well, the problem is in Europe, or the problem is somewhere else. LNG is a global fungible commodity, and the commodity can be diverted by pointing LNG barrels over to Asia, which has half of the sail time than from the Gulf Coast. It can offset the growing utilization and reliance on coal. So post the tragic invasion in Ukraine, we saw the highest increase in emissions in a single year, and it's because there was a resurgence of coal-fired fuel usage across the globe. And so I wish people would understand that LNG is a low-carbon fuel, a low-carbon solution, and is in parallel with energy transition and can support energy transition in other parts of the world where there isn't an ability to have gas like we have in their backyard. We've benefited, I live in Alberta, we've benefited from being able to, within a few years, we'll have gone from 80% reliance on coal-fired power generation in the province to zero. And that's only because we have gas in our backyard. So we can get gas in the backyards of Asian communities and other communities that don't have access to that energy and transition their lives as well. And that's a win for BC, it's a win for Canada, and it's a win globally, because this problem that we have in terms of climate change is a global problem, not a local problem.
Yeah, we're so lucky, and sometimes that global perspective is a little bit hard to miss. As I warm myself in front of this great, clean burning, fire in front of us, really reminded of this privilege that we have. So many stories coming out of Europe, people going into forests and chopping down conserved trees because the gas bill got so high they couldn't even keep their house warm. So, let's build it. Let's enable the world to come and take the product from us. And how about you, Jason? How would you put it in terms of the global side?
Yeah, I mean, I could agree completely with Bevin. I think the war in Ukraine has reminded people of the importance of having a reliable energy supply. And of course, as part of the energy transition, people want a responsibly produced energy supply. And Canada is blessed with amazing natural resources, particularly here in BC. And we have the opportunity to produce those in a more responsible way than many other countries, and share that with our allies by going through facilities like LNG Canada that are the lowest carbon intensity of any in the world. And I was fortunate enough, or really honored, to attend the luncheon last week in Ottawa with the Japanese Prime Minister and Prime Minister Trudeau. And the Japanese Prime Minister called out LNG Canada by name as a flagship project for Japan's energy security and for their decarbonization, because it is about displacing coal, it is about displacing Russian gas, and it is about having that security of supply. And the other piece, people talk about the Paris Agreement in the West very much as a decarbonization journey. But the Paris Agreement is really two pieces. It's about more energy and cleaner energy. There's 1 billion people in the world that live in energy poverty, that can't flip on light switches, can't get in a car and drive somewhere, can't turn on their stove. If they want to cook something, they got to go find some wood and burn it. And we all take that for granted. The Paris Agreement commits the world to bring those people out of energy poverty. So we have to double the amount of energy in the world between kind of 2000 and 2050 and reduce the emissions by 100% to get to net zero. These are incredibly complicated, and it's not going to be achievable without natural gas displacing coal as quickly as possible. So absolutely, BC has the resources. It's about the willingness to share those in a responsible way with our partners.
Let's drill into the competitive advantage piece a little bit more. You were actually in the news last week, Jason, and I'm sure you'll tell us why, about the electrification piece of phase 2 of your project. What does that competitive advantage look like? Why is it important, and how does your project establish it?
So when we look back at phase 1, our competitive advantages are, one, and Bevin's touched on it, the low-cost, abundant, high-quality reserves in the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin. We also benefit from a stable economy. We benefit from really good relationships with our partners. We benefit from that shipping distance, which is half of the distance from the US into Asia. And we have the benefit of being right on Asia's doorstep. So, there are some estimates out there that say the LNG market from 2021 to 2040 will grow by 90%, and 75% of that growth is in Asia. And no one is better placed than Canada to supply that. And of course, here in BC, we're blessed with hydro. And that's the reason, one of the main reasons, in addition to all the technology choices we've made and the clean upstream that we have here, that we are the lowest GHG emitting facility in the world. It's because we're blessed with the hydro and the natural resources. So all of those things line up to be very competitive for LNG Canada and for the other LNG projects that will come behind us.
Absolutely. And in terms of the pipeline side of it, I'm curious, how do we stack up? Is there a unique competitive advantage there, or perhaps even on the upstream that you think is worth bringing in, Bevin?
So from the pipeline component and the upstream, there's certainly our upstream customers. Our systems extend, as you know, past Coastal GasLink. We have a system across Western Canada as well as Enbridge, and we work together between West Coast and the NGTL system. We have a stable supply of world-class resource, which is reliable, which is stable, and has a life expectancy of literally 100 plus years. So it's safe, it's secure, we can develop it sustainably. From a pipeline perspective, in phase 1, we're able to deliver the gas with a single beating heart. We call it Wild Lake Compressor Station. That's already mechanically complete and built. And so the emission intensity of phase 1 is extremely low. And so that is a tremendous competitive advantage. And each of the partners in LNG Canada, they can source their own reliable resource to feed the project, or they can get it from the hundreds of other developers within the province of British Columbia. So that is a very unique framework.
Absolutely. I think it's time for us to take a couple of audience questions. There's one on hydrogen and LNG, both very hot topics in the energy landscape. Would either of you like to chime in on that, and whether you see a relationship between them?
So I'll give it a go and then let Bevin add. Hydrogen obviously has a lot of opportunity in the future, but the infrastructure is not there yet. And we do need to walk before we run. So hydrogen at scale is not going to solve the energy crisis in Asia right now or in Europe. But one of the main ways to develop hydrogen is through natural gas and CO2 sequestration. So there is a pathway for LNG going to Asia and then being converted to hydrogen there with CCS. That is one of many methods. There's also hydrogen going into ammonia and other things. So I certainly think that BC is blessed with resources that can be converted into hydrogen. But for the next decade, I'd be really focused on getting as much of what the world needs out there right now while we learn to scale some of these things.
Yeah, and maybe another angle to it is, and I agree 100% with Jason, we have to walk before we run. At TC Energy, we are involved in a number of hydrogen projects to date, and they are small-scale delivery type projects, and we're learning from those. But what's really important in terms of hydrogen or CCS or otherwise is consistent and stable regulatory frameworks and clarity around the regulations that will govern that industry. We're developing our pipelines in Canada under Bill C-69 as an example. That is the same regulatory framework that we'll need to develop energy transition investments. And so clarity around those regulatory policies is going to be the first step in attracting capital to hydrogen economies in Canada or otherwise, and that clarity is important.
Great. We're almost at time, so I'm going to ask a final question, and we've one final one from the audience. Both of you are deeply immersed in the day-to-day side of it. You're also thinking long-term. I'd love for you to look into your crystal balls. Let's say we have those next to the fire here. Where do you think your projects are going to be in 10 years? Anything on final investment decisions the audience is wondering that you can share about us on second phase, third phase, and onwards?
So 10 years from now, I'm confident we will have delivered thousands of cargoes of LNG safely and responsibly to our customers around the world, and we will have proven what you can achieve in BC. In terms of phase two, we are actively in discussions with our partners and with governments and other stakeholders on phase two. We do have a fully permitted plant for phase two that would replicate phase one, but we are conscious of the environment we're in, and we're always striving to do better. So we have spent a lot of effort and engineering to look at, is it feasible to move towards electrification? Because that is the next step, would be to electrify our compressors, which are the main kind of heart of the plant. It is feasible, but right now that power and that quantity is not available in Kitimat. The transmission capacity is not there. So as that capacity becomes available, it is feasible for us to start up our plant with gas-fired turbines, which is just like phase one, which is the lowest GHG intensity of any plant on the planet, and then improve upon it once we can get that electricity. And if we can find a way to do that in a cost-competitive way, I'm confident we will. And in 10 years, I hope as I stand on our jetty and look at our ships sailing out, that I look around the corner in the Douglas Channel and see ships sailing away from the Cedar facility and hopefully other facilities in Canada. It will be a shame if LNG Canada is the last big project. I hope that we are paving the way for the next wave of projects.
Final comments and predictions from you, Bevin?
So 10 years from now, I look forward to be operating safely and reliably, and that's what our communities expect and our customers expect. But in addition to that, we have time between now and the potential next phases of the project and otherwise to change the demographic of our workforce to more closely resemble that of which the communities we operate in. We've often focused on contracting opportunities with Indigenous partners and otherwise, but really transitioning our focus to transforming communities and transforming our workforce. And I look forward to seeing those leaders lead the next projects going forward. So.
Thank you so much for both of your insights today. This has been a great conversation, and I know Sarah is keen to get us off the stage. Be sure to follow both of these projects on social media, and you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Margaret.